yesterday's big news with a groundbreaking decision for women's sport. In the end, sanity prevailed. Reality trumped fantasy, facts beat feelings, and fairness triumphed over a twisted version of inclusion pushed by radical trans activists. FINA, World Swimming's governing body, made the only rational decision possible and restored fairness to the women's competition by imposing bans on transgender athletes. But don't expect facts or logic to sway the biology deniers among the activist class and their enablers in the media. Indeed, it's increasingly difficult to separate the two groups, given how readily many in the media regurgitate the incoherent talking points pushed by activists. The notion that excluding athletes born male but identifying as female is somehow exclusionary is laughable. Those athletes are free to compete, but in the male category. Of course, it's much easier to excel in the women's category, but that is hardly fair to the natural-born girls and women who do not have the same biological advantages as athletes born male, such as muscle mass, lung capacity, and heart size. As Abigail Schreier, author, and she is a fantastic commentator on this, she wrote the groundbreaking book Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. Well, in 2020, she wrote a piece about the gap between male and female athletes. She wrote, "Consider Allyson Felix, a contender for the title of fastest female sprinter in the world, who holds more Olympic medals than even Usain Bolt. Her lifetime best for the 400 metres is 49.26 seconds. Based on 2018 data, nearly 300 high school boys in the US could beat that time." And that advantage is felt right through the sporting ranks, not just at the highest level. Why should girls and young women miss out on opportunities, including sporting scholarships, to accommodate trans women? Today, more than 70% of FINA members voted for the organisation's new gender inclusion policy after hearing from representatives from three specialist groups: athletes, science and medicine, and legal and human rights. But FINA did make one error by leaving the door ajar for male-born competitors that have transitioned by the age of 12. Now, the FINA boss was quick to point out that that should not be seen as encouraging children to transition before 12. He said through his spokesman, "This is not saying that people are encouraged to transition by the age of 12. It's what the scientists are saying, that if you transition after the start of puberty, you have an advantage, which is unfair. They're not saying everyone should transition by age 11. That's ridiculous. You can't transition by that age in most countries, and hopefully you wouldn't be encouraged to." Basically, what they're saying is that it is not feasible for people who have transitioned to compete without having an advantage. But there are some who fear that ruling will be interpreted in precisely that way. And among them is writer and documentary filmmaker Matt Walsh, who tweeted, "Hate to rain on everyone's parade, but this is not the win you think it is. The new rule is that males who started their transition after age 12 can't compete against females. This will only be used to push for younger transitioning. The rule should simply be that males don't compete against females, period. No caveats. This rule might help protect women's swimming for a while, but it encourages and validates childhood transitioning, so it's a net loss." Now, Matt Walsh will join me next week to talk about his incredible documentary, What is a Woman? You will be blown away by what he was able to uncover, talking to doctors, counsellors, and these are doctors and counsellors who are encouraging children to transition. And he also spoke to a number of people who had already transitioned. That's next week. Now, back to swimming, and I think most sensible folk across the political spectrum can see through the malarkey pushed by the far-left activist. But sadly, academia, the media, and both public and private institutions are largely in the thrall of the trans agenda. You only have to look at the corporate virtue signalling, the number of people who are needlessly adding pronouns to their emails and business cards, and to madness like this. Have a look at this. This is Leslie Sinclair, a 66-year-old retiree and regular blood donor. He's been donating blood for 5 decades. Well, not anymore, because as the Telegraph reports, he was turned away after refusing to indicate if he was pregnant. Yes, Mr. Sinclair was barred from donating after he said it was unnecessary for him to answer a question on a form asking if he was pregnant. He thought that was unnecessary given he is a man in his 60s. But staff at the clinic said they could not accept his blood unless he provided a response, arguing that it is not always clear if someone is pregnant and that policy is in place to, quote, promote inclusiveness. It's little wonder that despite the push from the activist and media class, the public are fed up with the excesses of this trans agenda. A poll on the Herald Sun website today showed that only 2% of respondents were against FINA's ruling banning trans athletes from the women's competition. The reality is that men and women are different, and pretending otherwise only hurts female competitors. Male bodies cannot become female no matter what concoction of drugs are consumed. This is something that many high-profile trans women acknowledge. I think we just saw images of Caitlyn Jenner and Blair White there. They're 2 trans women who say that. They say you cannot fully become a woman. Men are bigger, faster and stronger. The very best female athletes in the world have no chance of beating male competitors, whether it's basketball, tennis, athletics or swimming. Women's sport must be protected from school competitions all the way to the elite ranks.